係，唔該各位同事。
Members, I'm sorry I was asking a question in the other meeting and I had to finish it. So thank you. We have a quorum and this is the appointed time. This is the panel on manpower. I need to brief members on a number of things. We have a rather long meeting today. It will be adjourned at 7 p.m. But of course, it also depends on how the public hearing goes. The scheduled time for adjournment is 7 p.m. So first item on the agenda, information paper issued since the last meeting. We have a letter from Dr. Fernando CHEUNG in relation to working hours and remuneration for bus captains. I must stress that we're unable to discuss this issue because this is followed up by the panel on transport, and we explained to the administration, which is of the view that it would be better if the issue is followed up by the panel on transport. We do have a written reply sent to that panel. And then next item, date of next meeting and items for discussion. Members, please refer to the list of outstanding items for discussion and the list of follow-up actions. And the next regular meeting is scheduled for the 17th of July 2018, 4:30 p.m. The administration has proposed to discuss two items. The first, Thank you. We have the most updated version here. So we have two items for discussion at the next meeting. The next one is the occupational safety situation for 2017. That's item 15 on the list of the outstanding items for discussion. For the second item, we have a letter jointly submitted by Dr. Fernando CHEUNG, Mr. CHEUNG, in relation to importation of labor for the elderly home sector, and there is a loophole. And we only received that letter at the end of last week, although the letter requests that the item be discussed at this meeting. I'm afraid we're unable to change today's agenda item. I explained the situation to the administration. They're happy to amend the proposed items such that next time we can discuss the proposed measures for importing foreign labor for the care services sector. So any views from members on the two proposed items? Mr. CHEUNG. Thank you, Chairman. I need to thank Chairman for arranging with the administration in such a shortness of time. I'm not against this item being discussed in the July meeting, but I think it would be better if we have a special meeting in June. The matter happened on the 14th of June and is still developing. And Dr. Lord Kwong, the Secretary, said that labor importation will happen sooner or later, but then something now has happened, and it is really outrageous in a sense that there is no payback for the working hours, and it is also said that it's common practice. It is adopted by other elderly homes as well, so it's a matter of policy. So I hope that we can have a discussion as soon as possible. But I respect the Chairman's handling of the matter. I won't object to the item being discussed in the July meeting either. Thank you, Mr. CHEUNG, for your efforts, but we've tried our best. The earliest time we can discuss it is the July meeting. It's not just a matter of my preference. I have to accommodate other members' requests as well. So at the earliest opportunity, which is the next meeting on the 17th of July, we will discuss this issue. No other views? Thank you. The third item, rehabilitation services for injured employees. So we can begin this public hearing session. I will now invite the deputations and individuals as well as the administration to come in.
係，多謝各位團體代表。
Thank you, deputations, for coming to our meeting. We received applications from 16 deputations and individuals, and they would attend the meeting. We also have one written submission received. And for those who have come in, after you've spoken, if you wish to submit a written submission, please do so, because you only have a speaking time limit of 3 minutes. You may not have enough time, so we welcome written submissions. Now, would deputations and individuals please be seated? Although this may not be the first time you come here, I need to explain once again that there is a headset in front of you. We have 3 channels, altogether 4 channels. Channel 0 for floor, 1 for Cantonese, 2 for English, and 3 for Putonghua. And please avoid code mixing when you speak during the 3-minute time limit for the convenience of interpreters. And there is also a notice for members of the public attending or observing logical meetings. So may I now first invite Deputy Commissioner for Labour, Mr. Jeff Leung, to walk us through the paper. Thank you, Chairman. The administration fully agrees that rehabilitation services is conducive to early recovery of injured workers so that they can return to work. It is very important. At the moment, the hospital authority provides a comprehensive range of rehabilitation services to patients based on their clinical needs. The goal is that such services can be provided as soon as the condition of the patient is stabilized. And since 2003, the insurance industry has implemented the Voluntary Rehabilitation Program, VRP, which serves as an additional channel for injured employees to receive free rehabilitation services in the private sector through the insurance arrangement to facilitate their speedy recovery and early return to work under safe circumstances.
Currently, there are 17 insurers participating in the VRP, and based on the information given by the participating insurers, the total number of cases of injured employees joining VRP from March 2003 to June 2017 was over 25,000. The Labour Department regularly conducts surveys of the participating insurance and injured employees to keep in view the implementation of the voluntary rehabilitation program. I'm very happy today that we have a hearing at this panel to hear views from stakeholders so that we're able to improve our work in providing rehabilitation services for injured employees. Thank you. We're now going to go straight into presentations. Each person will have 3 minutes. May I first invite Mr. Ip Wai Ming from the Hong Kong Federation of Trade Unions, Occupational Safety and Health Association Company Limited. Thank you, Chairman. I know that the Labour Department will sound very bureaucratic. If everything is as smooth as well done as made out by the Deputy Commissioner, then we wouldn't be here providing our views today. Well, we have already submitted a written view, so I'm not going to go too much into detail here. The Employees' Compensation Ordinance, I think, has already reached its end. I don't think that it can further enhance its function because the ECO mainly focuses on compensation and not on rehabilitation. And it also does not facilitate early return to work for injured employees. That is why we are very disappointed. The administration has not done anything to try to help employees in their rehabilitation and speedy recovery. So mainly, you only provide a compensation for injuries at work. And so both employees and employees are at odds with each other, because there is not much that can be done. So should this be a continuous tug of war? Because there doesn't seem to be any answer out of this. I think we should try to introduce rehabilitation services into the ordinance. I know that there are some views that there should be an independent department to look into this. We do not disagree. However, we believe that there should be some intermediary companies to ensure that employees can rehabilitate, and that there should be a system of mutual confidence between the insurers and also the employees and employers. Thank you. Ms. Lee from Hong Kong Catholic Commission for Labor Affairs. Thank you, Chairman. Injured employees suffer both physically and mentally. But then Hong Kong has not done much in terms of rehabilitation. We see that every 3 years, that for the last 3 years, there are over 10,000 cases per year for those who are injured for more than 3 days and could not go to work. And there are also many employees who are waiting for the court decision to ensure that they can get their entitled sick leave, because sometimes the employers do not believe the employees are really still incapable of returning to work. Insurance companies, of course, also want to make a profit, and so they would look into their cost. We see that sometimes the insurance companies would doubt the injuries and question the employees. We see that right now. There are now case officers to follow up cases of conflict, but the Labor Department needs to face these issues. We know that there has been more follow-up, but it is not enough. Many employees do not get paid, and if 4/5 of their salary has been stopped, then of course they would comply with any requests made by the insurance companies. We believe that the Labor Department should make a judgment to help employees when they keep on being questioned by employers. And in 2017, there are only 32 cases in which employers refuse to pay injured employees. We do want the Labor Department to strengthen up enforcement so as to ensure that the employees can be assisted, and not just to defer the cases to the district courts, because it would be a very huge mental stress to the injured employees. Thank you. Next is number 4, Mr. Yao from Diocesan Pastoral Center for Workers. Thank you, Chairman. We have been providing assistance to injured employees in the last few years. They are mainly grassroots workers who work as a cleaner or in manual work. Under the current ordinance, everything is based on public hospital cost. So the workers can only rely on public medical services. But the public medical services cannot provide adequate services for injured employees, and therefore sometimes they miss their golden rehabilitation period, and so they cannot recover speedily to return to work. Very often, insurance companies have their own agenda, and they would try to gain the trust of the injured workers and then require them to sign off their medical documents or to make them sign a settlement. Therefore, workers are distrustful of public services. Even though there is a rehabilitation service, they do not have the desire to join such programs. The employers are not interested in providing rehabilitation services, especially to the grassroots employees as well. Therefore, our center believes that in the short run, the government should provide a better higher ceiling for medical services, so that it will be on par with private market cost. And so if you're able to provide it to a private market level, then the workers can go find services that they believe in so that they can return to work as soon as possible. Secondly, we hope that the government will put in resources to provide rehabilitation services department under the hospital authority. We believe that if the government will take the lead, then the workers will be more willing to go to these services. Thank you. Dr. Low from Hong Kong Workers' Health Center. Thank you, Chairman. Well, before I speak on behalf of Hong Kong Workers' Health Center,我都要代表社區中心，我哋呢就係
in Hong Kong to workers with injuries and occupational diseases. Such program could provide early rehabilitation to these workers and early return to work that would be beneficial to the workers, employers and society. 好啦，工人健康中心呢就倡議呢一個叫職業傷。
So our center also calls for an independent center to help with rehabilitation after injuries. And so I would also like to give some of my views in relation to paper 03, because right now the hospital authority cannot provide enough services for early rehabilitation. And in paragraph 5, it talks about implementation of the VRP, and that from March 2003 to June 2017, there were 25,000 cases of injured employees joining the VRP. And then from 2003 to 2016, the Labor Department has seen a total of around 52,000 cases of injuries of work. So it means that this is only a very small number, less than half who receive or help under the VRP. And then we can see that out of 3,505 cases, only 1,823 cases of employers return to work. So that means that only 9.8% use the VRP and only 5% returned to their work. And for those who receive interview under the Labor Department, about 80% of them believe that the VRP is helpful to them. So if there are over 32,000 cases, there should be about 28,000 cases who are willing to participate in the VRP. So from numbers, you can see that many workers are willing to participate, and there's still a lot of room for department. The Labor Department should provide services to help with rehabilitation, and it should be set up independently because it would be even better. And actually, the thank you. Number 7, Mr. Ho Wang. We believe that in terms of rehabilitation services and health, we believe that more could be done. We think that one case is too many for injured employees. We have always been in agreement that rehabilitation services is very important to help injured employees return to work. Right now, injured employees can receive comprehensive range of rehabilitation services under the hospital authority, including physical therapy and also occupational therapy. And employees can receive such services under the HA. The occupational therapist will also give recommendations to the workers on when they can return to work, and to provide recommendations on job nature to the employers. We believe that this is very appropriate.
Starting from March 2003, the insurance industry, together with the Labor Department, launched the Voluntary Rehabilitation Program, which serves as an additional channel for injured employees to receive free rehabilitation services in the private sector through the insurer's arrangements to facilitate their speedy recovery and early return to work under safe circumstances. The Liberal Party is of the view that the relevant program would allow injured workers to receive the appropriate rehabilitation services in a timely manner, which would help with their speedy recovery and would minimize the chance of permanent injury. They could return early to work. It's a win-win for employers, insurance industry, as well as employees. So we appreciate the program. Finally, the Liberal Party attaches great importance to the statutory rights and benefits of employees. For employees who are injured at work or suffering from occupational diseases, they should be able to receive the rehabilitation services and compensation. At the same time, employers are also required to comply with the law and protect employees. We understand it is also the employees' wish to return to work as soon as possible. The government should therefore step up effort in job placement for recovered employees. Seat number 8, Mr. Y. While I retired early, I see some familiar faces here. I used to be a union member as well. Previously, injured workers were able to take a whole month off if they suffered injury at work before 1997, but no longer the case after 1997. Is it really true that employees get healthier after 1997? We need to reflect on ourselves because, just like RTHK 31 program, we have a lot of news programs talking about workers having to work for long hours, and I used to work as a contract worker in an elderly home. And for contract workers, we were required to work very long hours. And then when I asked about other employees on pension, they had nothing to do with these menial work. Well, the CE should look after the grassroots workers, because cleaners nowadays in the street cannot enjoy paid meal breaks. They need to work for 6 hours in a row, and they know nothing about occupational diseases. And I know a lot of fellow workers in this situation, and I'm surprised that there is no representative from the hospital authority. The Workers' Center is an advisory body. Like Dr. Chu, I think, said, occupational diseases is a new kind of disease, and Sapin Silping, the electrical member, also asked 2 questions in the Legislative Council in relation to occupational safety and health. The OSHC had no enforcement power, and in the CE's previous policy address in paragraph 84, she also said that the Labour Department should step up enforcement action to tackle occupational safety and health. Just like the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, and after a spate of industrial accidents, some workers died. So there should be openness so that workers could come forward and talk about their cases. You need to add the dirty laundry, even if you allow them to remain anonymous. You should not be afraid of the employers, and employees should not need to be fearful of being sacked. We should start with the grassroots workers so that we can have social harmony. Thank you. Seat number 9, Madam Wu Shui-san. Well, I'm the advocacy officer of Hong Kong CTU. I think that comparing to the Liberal Party, we are living in parallel universe. Very often we encounter aggrieved workers. I come across some cases. For example, the hospital authority stops issuing sick leave, and the worker continues to suffer from pain, and the worker then forks out money to do MRI. It's found that the spine is fractured, and we also have injured workers suffering from permanent incontinence. The doctor cannot tell the cause. So for the worker concerned, he cannot return to work, and he also suffers from physical and psychological damage. It's not just a matter of economic loss. As far as the worker is concerned, even after the workers return to work, there is no way to account for the economic loss and psychological trauma. We agree that there should be a comprehensive range of rehabilitation services, especially a mechanism should be set up with the participation of insurance industry. A fund should be set up for the OSHC to undertake the operation. It's not just about injury at work. Of course, we have a lot of injured workers in many sad cases, and they no longer trust insurance companies. If we are to provide comprehensive services, we should start at the workplace. As an employer, if I receive a note from the doctor saying that there should be no physical exertion for the employee, I would be puzzled. I don't know what it means. And also, there should be trust between employers and employees so that the employees would know what arrangement would be put in place at the workplace. And all this hinges on guidelines and arrangements. There should be a public department responsible for coordination, because it definitely will win the trust of employees and insurance companies rather than a private organization. Well, actually, our workers have come across a lot of cheating cases as well, and very often the insurers and the company's point of view could be whether higher insurance premium has to be paid the following year. We therefore have no confidence. So in essence, if we have a mechanism not having the trust of employees, such that employees are not taking part in it, it will just be a waste of resources. I must say that this is not just something about healthcare. The government should do something about eliminating discrimination and reinstating the employment of these injured workers, because otherwise, if these injured workers return to work, they may still face discrimination, there may not be proper arrangement, and it is far from full rehabilitation. So the government should step up its effort. Number 10, Mr. Kwok. A lot of deputations and individuals already shared their experience of coming across cases of injured workers. I'd like to talk about providing emotional support to injured workers. After taking rather long sick leave because of serious injury, the worker may find it even harder than normal because, on the one hand, they suffer from economic loss. Even if the employer is very compliant and pays 4/5 of the worker's wages, it already poses huge challenge for the worker to receive a lesser pay, not to mention the fact that the worker will have to have numerous follow-up appointments. The worker, therefore, is very anxious about the sick leave certificates. For example, if the worker cannot get the sick leave certificate or the doctor grants only very short period of sick leave, they'll be worried where which other doctor to turn to. And after some time, the worker may be invited by insurance companies or loss adjusters to review the case, and then they may need a negotiation expert to see what information can or cannot be disclosed to insurance companies. As a result, the injured worker may face even greater pressure when they are recovering from the injury at work. And we believe that the greatest obstacle is for the worker to acknowledge that he is a disabled person, and this is a really psychological hurdle, difficult to climb. And we provide free counseling service for workers, and we find that after receiving our counseling, these workers are in a better position to know themselves and acknowledge their situation, and there is much improvement. So I'd like to make a suggestion here. For the OSH clinic operated by the Labour Department, well, there is a service, that is to say, there should be mutual help groups set up for patients to share their experiences and give mutual encouragement. However, we don't have a lot of such OSH clinics. We, in fact, only have 2 in Hong Kong at the moment. Our suggestion, therefore, is that if we're able to set aside a corner in each public hospital so that workers can enjoy the service at different locations. And in fact, recently the chief executive has said that a pilot scheme will be launched in a health center in Kwai Ting, and I wonder whether such counseling and emotional support services can be provided for workers who sustain injuries at work, so that apart from helping them with recovering from physical injuries, their emotional status can also be helped. Next, Ms. Lau. I'd like to reflect a number of cases in relation to workers in Tin Shui Wai and other areas. As mentioned by other deputations, we do not have sufficient resources in terms of rehabilitation services in the public sector. Apart from outpatient services, according to workers, they also find it difficult to access certain services. For example, regarding outpatient service, telephone booking is required, but it is common experience that the telephone line never gets through, or that the worker may need to ring the line again and again to secure a booking. This poses great pressure on workers who would like to access outpatient service, because it has to do with whether the employee can receive 4/5 of the wages from employers. These two are correlated. As a result, the workers feel pressured. Second point, the workers would visit GOPC to get sick leave certificates because for specialized outpatient services such as orthopedics, etc., you need a referral from GOPC. In some cases, workers may need to wait for as long as a year before they have access to specialized services such as orthopedics. We need the help of Legislative Council and the government so that more resources can be provided to the hospital authority, and so that workers will not need to wait for a long time, thereby delaying their recovery progress. Another point is about the doctor's diagnosis and the doctor's advice. Inconsistency is common. One classic example is that a worker goes to a doctor recommended by a loss adjuster. The worker suffers from injury on the lower back and wrist, etc., and that doctor recommends that the worker returns to work after 4 days of sick leave. Of course, the worker refuses, and very often the situation is confusing because, like I said, the worker very often relies on GOPC, and GOPC is served by different doctors on a rotation basis, and different doctors may give different pieces of advice and granting different periods of sick leave, and the workers feel helpless.
Mr. An Lee from Neighborhood and Worker Service Center. Thank you. I'm very happy to speak on behalf of the neighborhood workers. I'm sure all of you will agree that the Labor Department has responsibility to protect all workers, whether they're injured or not, and to protect their rights. But it seems that it is not the case right now. Work injuries can prolong for a period of time. I luckily have not such experience, but I know many friends who are injured at work, and it takes a long recovery time, and it also causes stress on them emotionally. They may receive few months sick leave, or maybe it can even prolong to 2 to 3 years, but then they feel very stressful, and their assistance actually is not adequate. For example, the insurer may provide a settlement for the workers, and the workers will go to the Labor Department to see whether it is appropriate. The Labor Department will then refer the worker maybe to a social worker. And so the workers feel very stressful, and therefore will settle the case with a very low sum. Many other friends have already raised this point. Right now, the ceiling of medical services is only about $300 per day. It is a very low ceiling, and you can only have that 4/5 salary paid to you with a sick leave certificate. Many specialized services such as orthopedics will require a long waiting time, for example a year or two, And so the worker will need to go to the specialized clinic once every 4 days to get a sick leave certificate, and it causes huge emotional stress on the worker. So I want to ask whether we could reduce the waiting time for specialized services. Can you ensure that it will not exceed 2 months? And can you really try to raise the ceiling of medical services, because right now it is way too low. Sometimes the employers would delay paying their salary, and this would not be enough for them to maintain a living. I hope that there will be more assistance given to injured workers. Thank you. Seat number 13. Ms. Wong, representing Government Frontline Employees Union. To an injured worker, rehabilitation takes a very long time. The worker hopes to recover as soon as possible and would also need support emotionally and physically. As many of them have pointed out, insurers would only focus on money compensation only. But workers need assistance not only in medical services. Right now, there is not enough service because the ceiling is only $300. For specialized services, only $370. Workers can suffer many different kinds of injuries, and without adequate assistance, it would hinder their recovery. Some workers may actually lose their capability to work after injury, and they will need to face many different issues. For example, they might be made to leave their original job. People who work in the government already find so many obstacles, so you can imagine how difficult the private market will be. Sometimes the workers may not have made a full recovery and would need less physical exertion. But then some supervisors do not respect doctors' opinion and would still give hard or heavy work to the injured workers. And some workers, even though they have this letter from the doctor recommending light work only, do not get allocated work requiring less physical exertion. And even the hospital, those under the hospital authority will continue to tell the injured workers to go back to work as soon as possible without giving ample support. Injured workers face huge emotional stress and burden. Doctors, physical therapists, social workers can all provide support, but they do not work with each other, and there is no clear structure or policy to work together. Therefore, it is not very successful. There is no one consistent policy for injured employees. I hope that the government can enhance the assistance provided for injured employees, such as amending the ordinance to try to make it more comprehensive. Ms. Wong, I'm sorry, time is up. Thank you. Mr. So Ziwa from Hong Kong Occupational Therapy Association. Thank you, Chairman. Perhaps I could share with you our views from the perspective of the Hong Kong Occupational Therapy Association. Maybe some of you may not be clear what kind of occupational therapy services are provided. Actually, we've provided services for over 45 years, and there would be recommendations on what kind of work injured employees could go back to and the therapy that they need. Although we try our best to assist those in need, it is very difficult for us to make employees to receive assistance or support as soon as possible, and so sometimes it lowers the success rate. We believe that there should be a strong policy to ensure that we could encourage the injured employees to come for assistance. And I think that with such cooperation, then we could come up with a better, more trustworthy policy, and to help injured employees to have a speedy recovery and to return to their work as soon as possible. See, number 15, Ms. Deng Simon. Hello, my name is Deng Simon from Association for the Rights of Industrial Accident Victims. We are all sitting here to help injured workers return to work as soon as possible. But now there are really so many problems. I hope that the Labor Department will try to plug the current loopholes. We hope that there could be a central rehabilitation fund to help injured employees, and there are 3 points we'd like to raise. First of all, an independent or a centralized fund will help the employees think of what kind of services they prefer and not only go for public services. It should be in the format of a medical voucher, so that employees will not need to worry about the cost or have to wait for a long period of time. It should also include diagnosis tests such as MRI or other services that are not included right now. And workers can choose the different medical services they want. That would provide them with more options. Some of the therapists have mentioned the therapists should step up as soon as possible to give a helping hand so that the injured employees would not miss their golden recovery period. And an independent third party should be responsible for the management of the fund. We hope there could be some people who are neutral to help work with the communication between departments and to help injured employees to adjust to their difficulties and the issues they may face during their recovery period. The fund should also allow different participants such as professionals, insurers, employers, and employees. And most importantly, the management of the fund should allow injured employees to have a follow-up on their cases in receiving counseling services, therapy, and so forth. Thirdly, there should be a return to work policy. There is no point in returning to the same job position if the employee could not take up the same kind of work. And many of the injured employees cannot go back to their original work position. In other countries such as Canada, the employer tries their best to post the injured employee in a more suitable position. And so I think more should be done in this manner. Thank you. Next we have Mr. Wu from Hong Kong Physical Therapy Association. Thank you. Well, I think that right now too much is put on compensation. Compensation is not enough. For example, when an employee is injured without proper therapy, the employee will not be able to recover and would receive compensation because he cannot return to his job. But does it make the worker happy? We don't think so, because for many of the workers we talk to, most of the employees hope to recover as soon as possible and to return to their life, to their normal life as soon as possible. You know, when an employee becomes injured, then the employee would need therapy and rehabilitation. But is rehabilitation given on a timely basis? For specialized services, you will need to wait for at least half a year or perhaps even longer. For example, for orthopedics, and you might need to wait 18 months or even longer. There's actually a golden recovery period. In the past, we talk about a 6 months. Now it's actually 3 months. And after that 3 months golden period, there might be complications, and there might be many changes made to the employee, and he would not have a good relationship with his family. So can he really recover fully to return to work? That's a big question here. Many of the frontline medical service providers already are doing their best. And we know that for physical therapy, you might need to wait for many months. Some of the physical therapists already try to see injured employees as soon as possible within the first few months. But do we really have enough time to take care of these injured employees? How about the others who have been waiting for over 10 months? Is that fair to them? So there is a lot to discuss. We think that injured employees should be treated independently, individually, and not put together under the exchange.
Well, other deputations mentioned the VPR, but usually the insurers would play the leading role. So we should have an independent, impartial organization to monitor its operation. It is important because we need the trust of patients, and the organization should not favor employers or insurers, such that the employee can enjoy speedy recovery. Thank you. 16 members have spoken, so I open the floor for members to ask questions. And members can follow up on the speeches made by deputations. We have Dr. K.K. Kwok, Mr. Leung Yiu Chung, and altogether 4 members. Let's start with Dr. K.K. Kwok. I thank the deputations for taking your time to come here. I think that in relation to rehabilitation services for injured workers, the message is very clear. The system is far from satisfactory, especially the golden period of recovery. For example, one would have to wait for 3 months for a follow-up appointment. That completely takes away the golden period of recovery, and it is unfair to pass the buck to HA because we have different injuries, and in fact we have different schemes operated by the government that charges levy, such as mesothelioma and pneumoconiosis, and the government should set up a statutory body or a platform so that we can work on providing rehabilitation for injured employees. Secondly, there should be a central platform to provide a rehabilitation plan with a clear goal. At the moment, there is no rehabilitation plan for an injured worker. They cannot change the system. And the HA on the whole is short on resources. They pass the golden period of recovery without getting any help. So regarding the government's paper, I think I won't give a pass mark today. My question directly to the administration is this. How are you going to respond to the suggestion of a central rehabilitation fund? I understand some deputations would like the OSHC to do it, but according to the ordinance, the council is not empowered to set up a fund, and it is also somewhat in conflict with the objective of the OSHC, Occupational Safety and Health Council. So we need to set up a platform as soon as possible, but of course this will rely on a legislative exercise from the administration. Every year we have over 35,000 employees who are injured at work, and because of the inadequate support, they can not return to work. Not to mention their families bearing the brunt. So about the loss of productivity, can the government also provide some information? Well, I'd like to thank deputations for coming to this public hearing. As I mentioned in the beginning, the government attaches importance to this issue in terms of rehabilitation and reinstatement of employment. There are indeed more can be done to walk the extra mile. And I think that as far as the workers, insurers, employers, even the whole community are concerned, they all stand to benefit if this is improved. So this is about what we can do as a way forward. I need to go back and consolidate views and discuss with my colleagues to see how we can further improve our existing mechanism. One idea we have is whether in the short term we can enhance the rehabilitation services. As for the nitty-gritty, who should provide the resources, what services should be provided, etc., the details are yet to be ironed out, so I'm afraid I cannot give you details today. I can only say that I will follow up on the matter as soon as possible. I don't know for how much longer you're going to drag on your feet. At least there should be a clear direction. And I asked a specific question on figures. He hasn't given me the figure. And in fact, under the ordinance, if the platform is to be set up by the council, it is in conflict with its objective. So these questions, please. About the loss of productivities or man hours, I do not have the figures at hand. I'll try to supplement these figures after the meeting. As for our way forward, well, we're here to listen to views today. I can say that the government has undertaken to work on it as soon as possible, but then we do not have a specific proposal ready. I'm afraid we cannot give too much details away at the moment. We understand the role of the Occupational Safety and Health Council, so we also need to consider whether the council's participation would be right. We need time to look into options. Thank you. Next, Mr. Leung Yu-chung. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, deputations, for coming here to give us your valuable views. And I thank Deputy Commissioner Mr. Leung for sharing your views with us. But it's just a lot of hot air, because we have not discussed this as a new issue. And you seem to suggest that the government is here to listen to views. Following that, you will go back and then look into the matter to come up with a proposal. But this is a long-standing problem for so many years. And I think all the relevant associations and serving injured employees have given you a lot of views. Why is it that you need to study further? So when are you going to come up with a proposal? You may say that you have no idea when, and this will happen again in the next administration and the administration next, and this will be an endless discussion. I think there are 3 key points raised at today's meeting. One is the golden period of recovery. Treatment should be provided as soon as possible for speedy recovery. But you don't seem to be able to answer our question. The only option is public hospital, but because of the long waiting time, definitely the golden period of recovery would elapse. So the next option is to go for independent service. And some deputations mentioned that there is a concern that the organization might appoint a panel doctor or a clinic, and that the doctor serving under an organization may be subject of doubts as to whether impartiality can be maintained. The third point is financial assistance. For injured employees, very often a case would drag on for 3 years. At least 3 years from filing an application to finally having the case heard and having a ruling. And many employees do not get the statutory compensation of 4/5 of his wages. So how does an injured employee make ends meet? CSSA may be the answer. But can CSSA really help the injured employees as well as the family members? Very often the answer is no, because the injured employee may also need to receive treatment and pay for treatment. Now, other deputations, including myself, have all along talked about the central fund. The government continues to ignore our views. Now, you just said that there is no conclusion after you're just here to listen to views, and I feel disappointed. Over the years, I have made the same request in the Council. I will continue to do that. I believe other associations will do the same. But the government should not give such a disappointing response. Don't just tell us you listen to views and then you go back and look into the matter and you have no idea when in the future something will be done. Don't just give us an undertaking that you will work on it in the future. Can you give us a definite answer that you're going to give a proper response? Deputy Commissioner, I can only say that I'll go back and seriously look into the matter. I was in the post in the past, and now I am the one to follow up on this issue. And like I said, we are considering whether there are ways to enhance rehabilitation services that are not adequate, that are not swiftly provided. And as mentioned by deputations, credibility is important, because the unit providing rehabilitation services should be one that is acceptable by the injured employee. We've heard this view, and there is also a need to coordinate rehabilitation services, and there should be sufficient capacity to cater for the needs of injured employees. So in the future exercise, we're going to consider all these principles. I hope to reassure members that the government definitely is seriously looking into the matter. Mr. Poon Siu Ping. Thank you, Chairman, and I thank deputations for coming to offer us your views. Many associations have been airing their views for the past decade, but unfortunately, I believe that the government is really playing deaf. The government considers that as long as statutory compensation is provided under the Employee Compensation Ordinance, there is no need to conduct a serious study. In 2003, the VPR was introduced. I don't know whether the government considers it effective, because we only had some 3,000 cases in 2016. From the figures, it doesn't look good. That only accounts for a very low proportion of the total number of injury cases. In paragraph 6 of the administration's paper, it says that the LD recognizes that rehabilitation services are very important to ensure the recovery and early return to work of injured employees. And the LD is pleased to listen to the views of different stakeholders. Well, a lot of views have been expressed today. And I'd also like to follow up on this sentence. You said towards the end, if necessary, consult other government departments and relevant organizations. Just now, Deputy Commissioner said that you will seriously look into the matter. So what government departments and relevant organizations will be consulted? Just now, a lot of deputations mentioned the Central Rehabilitation Fund and also other suggestions, and the HA may have a multidisciplinary professional team. We still need to overcome the issue of a golden period of recovery, because many deputations mentioned that it is not good enough. So what will LD do apart from seriously considering the issue? What government departments and organizations will be consulted? Will you be more specific? Because it's written here in the paper.
Deputy Commissioner, thank you. Mr. Poon, for your question. You raised 2 points. Let me respond to the first one. Well, we have talked about the efficiency and effectiveness of the voluntary rehabilitation program. We believe that there is room for improvement, but the 3,000 odd cases in 2016 under the VRP is not only 4%, as some of you said. We have conducted a survey. On average, 80% of them who joined this VRP receive 40 days of sick leave or longer. So there is a larger need for rehabilitation. And for those who submit Form 2 requiring more than 3 days of sick leave, we're talking about 11,000 of them actually took 40 days of leave or more. So actually 40% of these who need longer rehabilitation joined the VRP. But as I said, this is not an ideal number. Therefore, we're going to try to come up with ways to enhance the services of this program. We consulted different government departments and stakeholders, and at this stage we do not yet have a new concept, but I think that we need to look at the main points of the rehabilitation program. Therefore, we're going to continue a communication with the insurers and also with the hospital authority to understand the service details. I've also mentioned counseling services. This is part of rehabilitation. We would also need, therefore, to contact the social welfare department. Thank you. So when do you think you would do this? Thank you, Chairman. As I've said earlier, we'll try to start as soon as possible. This is a very good opportunity for us today to listen to all your views, and we'll follow up as soon as possible. Dr. Fernando CHEUNG. Thank you, Chairman. As Mr. Leung Yu-jong said, this is not anything new. I would like to thank all the deputations and individuals for coming up here to tell us about the difficulties you face and work injuries. I think there is a lot of distrust. Employees do not trust the system because designated service providers will lean towards the insurers and employers. Employees are distrustful of employees in the case of fraud because they are afraid that the employees are trying to get more days off. And also, the employees do not trust the service providers and that they might miss out on their golden period. And there are also some intermediaries such as lawyers, notary publics, etc. So you would see many people trying to make money out of the whole thing, and therefore there is a lot of distrust between parties. The government should take the lead to try to set up an organization that everyone trusts. The voluntary rehabilitation program has already sped up rehabilitation services. If you could ask, for example, the Chinese University of Hong Kong to be in charge of the VRP, then people might have more trust in it. There have been other views such as setting up a central compensation fund, etc. But the government still hasn't done anything. I'm not going to try to argue with you for things not yet done. I hear you many times that you are trying to follow up with this matter. There is huge impact on Hong Kong's productivity because we are losing employees who are capable in their jobs, and because of our system, they are not able to recover in a speedy manner, and then ultimately they might have to rely on social welfare, and so everyone is a loser. Mr. Leung, this is a very important issue which needs follow-up. Everyone is losing right now. You at the Labor Department, what do you think is an appropriate time, or how long do you think it would take for you to come up with a better policy? Mr. Leung, I really can not give you a timeline right now. I think we will try to progress as soon as possible. That would be in the interest of everyone. It does take time to liaise with other departments, so I really am not in a position to give you a specific timeline right now. I understand that there is a need to follow up. If everything is done well, I understand that we could all be winners. So this is the only answer I can give you. I agree with what you said earlier. To come up with a program that everyone is willing to participate in and one that everyone can trust. We do need a trust in the system for it to work. We will also work towards this direction. Thank you. I really hope that you could give us, a timeline, because we're all losers. Even our injured employees are losers. So why can't you at least give us a reasonable time frame to sort of give some pressure to the industry and to the service providers? You're being very vague right now by saying that you will do it as soon as possible. I'm afraid that might take 10 years or even more. Thank you. It's now my turn to ask questions, but not that I think there would be any answer, however. Well, as soon as possible means that it's indefinite. We don't know when it could be completed. Well, you're not able to give us an answer today. I hope you could really provide us with a definite answer later on to see when you could complete with all the review work you are conducting right now. Secondly, on the injury procedure, I've seen some recent cases that workers suffered injuries, but he's a young person, he didn't speak out and he went to a doctor right after, and the employer refuses to acknowledge that it was a work injury. I think there should be more campaign done so that employees would understand what information is needed, and to help them understand the difference between work injury leave and regular sick leave. I hope that you could raise awareness in employees. Many of the individuals here said that right now more focus is put on compensation and less on how to help them return to work under safe circumstances. Employers would say there's not enough manpower. If it doesn't affect not regular work, sometimes injuries might be neglected by the employers. So I think we should think of how we could better protect employees' rights after returning to work after an injury. Well, I know that you wouldn't have any definite answer, but I do look forward to an answer as soon as possible. All right. I think all our members have asked questions. So this session will end here. We have to handle a motion right now, but we do not have enough members present right now. So let's try to call back members. This is a motion raised by Dr. K.K. Kwok, seconded by Dr. Fernando CHEUNG. This panel requests the government to look into setting a mechanism to promote in rehabilitation for injury at work, and to start a study in setting up a structure to help with speedy recovery. I think if they do not follow up, then it would be a waste of, it would have wasted the time of all those who came up for the hearing today. I hope that we could see some answer soon. If this motion is passed, I hope that the government could provide us with a written response as soon as possible and tell us what the timeline would be and how they're going to start legislature on recovery from work injuries. Also, the bell will ring for 5 minutes. We'll like to call members to come back to vote. Dr. KK Kwok, well, I think we can just vote by a show of hands, right? Yes. We have enough people, but we have already started the ring of the bell, so it will ring for 5 minutes. We do have a quorum right now, so please stay put.
We are
now going to vote on a motion proposed by Dr. KK Kwok and seconded by Dr. Fernando CHEUNG.
This panel requests that the government study and set up a mechanism as soon as possible to introduce an occupational disease rehabilitation plan and also kickstart a study on legislating on occupational safety rehabilitation. The bell is over. We have a quorum. We are voting on Dr. KK Kwok's motion. With those in favor, please raise your hands. All right. Those against? None. Those abstaining, please raise your hands. None. So would Madam Clerk please record the votes. 8 in favor, no abstention, nothing against, so this motion is endorsed. We move on to the next item. Let us invite the administration to come in first. This is the item on working hours policy way forward. So, Secretary for Labour and Welfare, Dr. Hon Fernando, over to you. Please walk us through the paper. Thank you, Chairman. The last time government, as you know, endorsed the report and recommendations of the then Standard Working Hours Committee, SWHC, which include 2 legislative proposals to protect lower-income grassroots employees earning not more than 11,000, that is referred to as contractual working hours legislation, and also the other proposal, mandatory overtime compensation legislation. Last year in July on the June on the 20th, we briefed the members on our proposal, but many panel members expressed strong reservations about the legislative proposals mentioned. And when we consulted the LAB Labour Advisory Board, we received similar views. In particular, the employee members of the LAB and trade unions strongly objected to contractual working hours legislation. Having considered these views, the government has decided not to pursue, for the time being, the 2 legislative proposals on contractual working hours and mandatory overtime compensation. And there are other recommendations put forward by the SWHC, for example, the industry-based tripartite committees would be drawing up 11 sector-specific working hours guidelines, and we will continue to work on this. There are also other recommendations. For example, the working hour situation should be kept in view on a continuous basis, and the household survey should be conducted, and this will be done. And in the first quarter of 2019, we're going to conduct a new round of household survey on working hour situation. There are also supporting measures. For example, we are going to review whether it is possible to enhance the working hours arrangement. For example, we will require and encourage employers to disclose more information on working hours arrangement when placing job vacancies through LD to enhance transparency, so as to prompt employers to provide appropriate working hours arrangements for employees. We will also launch large-scale education publicity activities to promote family-friendly employment practices relating to working hours arrangements. In relation to the 11 sector-specific working hours guidelines, we're going to review the effectiveness of these guidelines 3 years down the road, in about 2023, and on the 23rd of May 2018, the LAB was briefed on the way forward of the working hours policy. The members in general did not object to our proposal, but some employee members were disappointed at the lack of standard working hours legislation. 5 members have indicated they wish to speak, starting with Dr. K.K. Kwok and ending with Mr. Siu Ka-chun. This meeting will be adjourned at 6:55, so I'll give each member 5 minutes to speak. Questions and answers included. Dr. K.K. Kwok. In short, what I hear is this. The government is not keeping the promise and is playing delaying tactic. In the last administration, C.Y. Leung cheated his supporters including Chen Yunhan, it was outrageous. And then they came up with something very vague called contractual working hours. And this administration is even more outrageous. If you're not willing to budge, we are going to just set it aside. So, like I said, they're not keeping their promises, and they are playing delaying tactic. Well, the guidelines are really meaningless. 11 sectors. There are so many sectors in Hong Kong, but only 11 sectors are chosen. So other sectors will not be included. The guidelines are meaningless because they serve no purpose other than to encourage and incentivize employers to adopt better arrangements. But then it is toothless because there is no consequence. Don't put up a show. Just tell us you're not going to do anything. Third point, the review won't be conducted until 2023. So that is to say the existing administration will carry on for another term, which will begin in 2022. I don't know whether the Secretary will stay for another term. But this will be a very good excuse for you and Carrie Lam to take another term of office for 5 years. How can you put forward such a proposal? C.Y. Leung cheated Hong Kong people and he didn't use such a trick. This administration is using even dirtier trick. Well, last administration told blatant lies, and this administration doesn't even bother to tell lies. How many sectors will benefit from your proposal? Because the guidelines are not binding and there is no penalty. What about sectors not included in the 11 sectors? How long must they wait? An endless wait? I don't want this. I want the government to confirm this. Do you agree that the government is really relaxing its effort? And I think the government is just being thuggish. Just like standard working hours, I won't do it even if you force me, and the government is acting like a thug. They can't care less. So my question is whether you continue to be thuggish and refuse to implement standard working hours within your term. Secretary, I need to clarify, first of all, that C.Y. Leung, the last CE, put forward in his election manifesto a study into standard working hours legislation. And then the Standard Working Hours Committee was commissioned, and 2 years were spent on consulting the public, and there were also different consultation sessions and fora to seek views. And following that, a report was submitted to the last term government for consideration. And the last term government also adopted some recommendations in the report and came up with the legislative proposals, which did not win the support of this Legislative Council or the Labour Advisory Board. As a result, we have decided not to pursue these two legislative proposals for the time being. As for other matters, as I mentioned in the paper and in my opening remarks, these matters have been studied by the last term government and the Standard Working Hours Committee, and they will be conducive to our effort, and they will continue. I ask specific questions. I ask 11 sectors. What is the result after years of effort? And second question, what about sectors outside the 11 sectors chosen? How will they benefit so that these employees in these sectors will also enjoy better working hours arrangements? Secretary, I don't think I need to answer this question because I think the member is trying to express his views. As to how these 11 sectors are chosen, the SWHC looks into different sectors where there are more serious problems regarding working hours, so that we have a tripartite platform with the help of the Labour Department. Guidelines can be drawn up for the 11 sectors. I think that it has not been easy at all for employees and employers of the 11 sectors to work with the government in drawing up guidelines. I believe that the views are really quite divergent between the two sides. And I believe after drawing up the guidelines, they will serve a very good purpose for the 11 sectors in arranging for working hours of the employees, and will also be beneficial to legislating on working hours in the future. So we'll be forced to accept it. Mr. Poon Siu Ping, Secretary, as a really busy day, and the last meeting was about the abolishing the offsetting mechanism of the MPF, and this panel now discusses the standard working hours, and I think the direction is clear in your paper. It is said that you're ready to draw up 11 sector-specific working hours guidelines. And in paragraph 12, you mentioned that you briefed the Labour Advisory Board, and the employer members in general did not take exception to the proposed way forward, and some of the employee members were disappointed at the lack of SWH legislation and expressed concern over the effectiveness of the sector-specific working hours guidelines. I'd like to follow up on this. Another member just now mentioned 11 sectors. My understanding is this is a tripartite committee. I don't know the real situation, but I don't think they are on par with each other when there are members from the employer side, employee side, and the government. What happens if there is no consensus? Second question about an industry-based tripartite committee. I don't know whether the proportion or the composition would be changed, because about the proportion of employers, employees, the representativeness, I don't know whether you're relying on the original tripartite committee, or will the composition be changed? Secretary or Chairman, before we complete the relevant task and see whether this would help directing the employees and employers to the right direction in standard working hours legislation, I think it is rather premature. I just believe that it has been quite hard in forging a consensus between employees and employers. Once a consensus is reached, however, I believe it will be hugely beneficial. At the moment, the task is not yet completed, whereas for the mix of the tripartite committee, perhaps the Commissioner for Labour can take this question.
三方小組啦。
The tripartite committees, we've already set up 9 ones, and then we have seen 2 new ones with relatively long working hours, and they will be set up. These 2 are cleaning services and elderly home sector. If you look at the current existing tripartite committees, there will be representatives from the employers, employees, and also from the government. But there is no set mechanism in nominations or need certain representatives from the chambers of commerce. Many of the issues before have been resolved by tripartite committees on improvements in policy to the employers and employees side. Other than the existing tripartite committee members discussing on guidelines, we would also leverage on the tripartite platform to set up discussion groups and to invite relevant stakeholders or individuals to present their views at our tripartite committees. So we do not solely rely on existing members to set up the working hours. So that means in future you do not need the employer's side, right? Because if you have employers, employees, and government, yes, that's a tripartite. If you can allow 44 hours per week and 1.5 times for OT, maybe I think this can already be made between the government and employees. You don't really need the employers to participate. Am I right? Thank you for your question. Seven of the committees have already started preliminary work. The procedure in setting the working hours guidelines or any policy made should not be judged at this moment. Many of these important issues we would need a consensus. It reached, well, I've only been at this post as commissioner for over 6 months. Actually, many of the decisions made are not by vote. We would try to reach a tripartite consensus, and that would take negotiations and discussions. We need to give time to the tripartite committees to kick off the engagement to see what the decisions would be. Well, I think it is even Mr. Lok Chung Hong, I think this is worse than a toothless tiger because it's not legally binding and it does not cover all industries. It covers only 11 industries, and many of these 11 industries are maybe grassroots sectors. Usually for these industries, the working hours are very long and they believe that this is the norm. The working hours guidelines might actually legitimize these long working hours of maybe 11 hours or 12 hours. I think there might be a negative impact. It seems that you are trying to legitimize long working hours industries. So this is our major concern. To alleviate our concern, the Labor Department needs to set a very clear view. That it must be reasonable to employees and that it gives them a good work-life balance. The overtime compensation should be higher than regular OT, which should be at least 1.5 times the normal salary. We keep on hearing that there should be a consensus made between employers and employees, but you should understand from experience that it has always been difficult everywhere in the world. We in Hong Kong are very behind. We have not yet legislate standard working hours. It's very difficult to reach a consensus. You have to understand that there is really no free lunch. The government should, at a certain point, if you could not reach a consensus, to make a ruling. Otherwise, everything would be shelved and there would be no outcome. and the guidelines might not actually be useful, or nobody follows the guidelines. And after 1 or 2 years of not complying with guidelines, would you consider legislating standard working hours? Working hours in Hong Kong are by far the longest compared to other countries, because out of 60 countries or regions, Hong Kong ranks number 61 in terms of work-life balance. I think that the government should really do something for the people of Hong Kong. Could you actually draw reference from experience and try to legislate standard working hours? Dr. Law, thank you. There seem to be many assumptions made in past discussions. I'm sure if you could try to understand it, we're not only just trying to maintain everyone's stance in this tripartite platform. I've seen many employers who try to maintain a strong stance, and we see some people not being satisfied with certain employers. But I think at these committees, the employers, they actually are willing to discuss. I don't think we should make many assumptions in advance. Otherwise, if you already have presumptions, then it would be very hard to start discussions. We want employers to also to voice out their views. I'm sure that it could really help with setting out working hours guidelines. Well, all right, Chairman, what if it's what if nobody abides by it? Well, I don't think we should make other assumptions because the guidelines have not yet been formulated. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, I'm not sure if you remember when you made a toast on Labor Day and on May 1st, what you're actually toasting to, because history was that many workers sacrificed for trying to set reasonable working hours. But I don't understand why you are celebrating Labor Day. So I want to ask you what you're thinking when you raised your glass to toast Happy Labor Day. What exactly are you so happy about? Because it was a fight the workers had 200 years ago. It seemed that you haven't told people today why you want to celebrate Labor Day. Nobody understands the history. I think it's really unfortunate that all these people have sacrificed themselves all these years ago. Why are you implementing this exercise? We want to give 2 years to see whether employers would abide by these guidelines. I don't know why you're not putting down 3 years. That should be 2 years. And that the legislation should be made if no consent, if there is no use. But now it seems that you have taken it out. So it seems that it is even worse than last time. 2 years have become 3 years, and if there is no effect, then you would just wait. Everyone agrees that there should be legislation for standard working hours, but employers are not willing to go ahead with it. It is very clear that the only opposing party is employers, you should just let us know that you are bowing down to the business sector. Employers object to it only. Well, no, when you're running for CE, then the CE would of course say that you would take this forward. But now, after election, nobody is willing to do anything. So I really want to know what the government stance is right now. Does the government agree that there should be SWH legislation? I don't think that there are opposing views to SWH legislation because the only objector is the business sector. So do you agree in your celebration of Labor Day that there should be only like 8 working hours per day? Secretary. Well, the Labor Day is an important day to be grateful for workers' contribution in society. This is very important. I'm sure that in the future, the government will continue to acknowledge laborers in their contribution. Many improvements can be made in Hong Kong. Aside from listening to the views of the SWHC, we can also think of trying to promote work-life balance in Hong Kong. The government takes the lead in this, and we are going to continue to try to promote this in the future. Well, Chairman, I'm not sure whether there would be other, cocktail parties for Labour Party. So would you share with the public where the spirit of Labor Day lies? Can you tell people that Labor Day spirit is to look for 8 hours of standard working hours per day?
Secretary. Chairman, we already expressed our views on the Labor Day. Not a general comment. The spirit of a Labor Day is to strive for 8-hour work day. Would you tell the public this historical fact? Because the laborers themselves may not understand the history. They may not understand why we have a day off on the 1st of May. We may understand why we have a day off on Christmas or even Tuen Festival. Whereas for Labor Day, publicity should be done. Can you explain to the public why we have a day off on Labor Day? Can you explain history to the people? I have nothing to add. Next, Mr. CHEUNG. Thank you, Chairman. Just now, when answering Mr. Michael Look's question, the Secretary reminded us that there should not be any preconceived stance. But I think in terms of standard working hours, the government has a preconceived stance. GDP may be affected if we introduce standard working hours, but I need to provide some supplementary information. According to Expert Market and UK organizations, a survey in 2016 of the top 10 countries with the highest GDP, Luxembourg, Norway, Switzerland, Denmark, Netherlands. These are countries with the lowest number of hours of work. That means there is no direct correlation. And then the member talked about the toothless cat, the guidelines on working hours for 11 sectors. I say that it's not just toothless. It is a cat without a mouse. Because everybody loves the cat without the mouse. Everybody loves the guidelines. My comment is this. First of all, I need to thank you because you've included the elderly services sector. But I find this puzzling. Secretary and I belong to the same sector. Why is it that only residential care homes for the elderly is included? Because working hours arrangements are bad not only in RCGs but for other homes as well. For example, in an NGO, it is stated in the menu that if you are doing clerical or desktop work, the hours will not be counted towards overtime pay. For direct services, the number of hours are counted but not desk job. So we have hidden working hours. Secretary referred to the sectors having a more serious problem of working hours arrangement. Apart from the care sector, we also have the transportation sector and the accountancy sector. We know that for these sectors, the working hours are long, so why are they not included as well? It is said that there will be a 5-year pilot and you will not review the outcome until 2023. Or rather, after review in 2023, by then you will consider including more sectors. What about transportation sector? The working hours at the moment are already very long. Next point, the greatest problem with the guidelines is that you haven't included the problem of employees dying from overexertion at work. In Japan, there is a definition. If you work over 40 hours a week, it's regarded as overexertion. In Taiwan, the definition is 1 to 6 months before you die. On average, if you work overtime for 37 hours per month, then such a death will be regarded as overexertion at work. But the guidelines don't specify the definition of overexertion at work or that being the cause of death. That is why the guidelines have been criticized as a toothless tiger or toothless cat. Secretary, perhaps I didn't make myself clear just now. For the 11 sectors, apart from having relatively longer hours, if you look at the recommendations of the SWHC, the committee's concern is not just long working hours but the grassroots dominant employees. And as a result, they have a rather weaker bargaining power in negotiating working hours. And that is why we have the 11 sector-specific guidelines on working hours through the tripartite committee so that we can direct the sectors towards a more healthier development. As for overexertion at work leading to health problems or even death, we explained at this panel before. We conduct the relevant surveys on the relevant job types, and at this moment we have nothing to add. Well, let's take into account that you have considered the grassroots, which has a weaker bargaining power. What about transportation sector? Why isn't it included? Secretary. Well, Chairman, we should know that in terms of specific trades such as bus captains, the number of working hours are specified under the existing specific mechanism. Next, Dr. Fernando CHEUNG. Chairman, as early as the policy address in 2010, the then Chief Executive Donald Tsang started to talk about standard working hours. He said that he would look into its feasibility, and then in 2012 a study was conducted. The government published a report in 2013. C.Y. Leung deployed a delaying tactic by setting up a standard working hours committee that came up with 2 frameworks, first phase, second phase, numerous rounds of public consultations, so that it dragged on until the end of his term before a report was finally floated. The report recommends legislation. And then Carrie Lam said that there should not be legislation because it is not a very popular proposal. Instead, there should be 11 sector-specific working hours guidelines, and they won't be ready until 2019-2020. That means altogether, what has the government done in helping employees in Hong Kong get reasonable working hours? In 2015, the Credit Suisse or UBS conducted a survey, and Hong Kong has the longest working hours, over 71 hours a week, and we have over 300,000 employees working 60 hours per week or more. Their health is compromised. So, Secretary, your portfolio is labor and welfare. You're supposed to protect our employees, to safeguard their rights and benefits. But not only that their rights are not protected, we see their health being compromised, their family life being compromised, and the family relationships being compromised. As Secretary for Labor and Welfare, I don't know your take on this matter. You put the prosperity and economy of Hong Kong first. But this is built on the blood and sweat of employees, because they need to work overtime and they're deprived of a healthier lifestyle, so that their health is compromised and their family life is compromised. Have you calculated the economic loss in this regard? Because Dr. Law, you are so good at mathematics. You always consider everything from the economic perspective. If you continue to adopt this perspective and drag on your feet, then very likely we'll be losing even more. Around the world, we don't see many such examples in which economic development is boosted by making employees slaves. Well, you should know that the government's position is against filibustering, so we're not going to filibuster or drag on our feet. In fact, the last time government accepted the report of the Standard Working Hours Committee and the majority of recommendations therein, except two. One is on contractual working hours legislation, and the last time government accepted this recommendation. However, we did not have the support of this panel and the Labour Advisory Board. So for the current term government, we have decided not to pursue these two legislative proposals for the time being, and instead we would like to take forward other recommendations that would improve working hours arrangements so that we stay focused. I think it is beyond dispute. Nowadays, whether the working hours in Hong Kong are too long, I think there is a consensus in the community. The question is how we improve the situation of long working hours, how we can promote family-friendly employment practices and shorten the working hours. The government is happy to take this forward. The point is, in the last term government, when during the discussion process we did not find a very clear consensus in the community, and that is why we'd like to take on other aspects of the report so that we could do more. Well, simply because there is no consensus, you continue to drag on your feet. What happens if 10 years later you come back and say we still have no consensus? Meanwhile, the employees are paying for it in terms of their health, their family life. Is it that the government, or how is the government going to compensate? Well, Dr. CHEUNG asked you, Secretary, whether the government would only work if there is a consensus. We feel that there is a partial consensus, and we would like to work on the partial consensus to improve the overall working hour situation in Hong Kong. We believe this is a consensus. Mr. Yu Siwing. Chairman, on standard working hours, for certain sectors you may be able to quantify the work. But in terms of a services industry, things are more complicated. Over 80% or 90% of our employees work in the services industry. They come with different job types. And if we take a broad brush approach, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Just like the tourism industry, a tour guide may lead a tour to another country outbound, and in the middle of the night, if a member of the tour is unwell, the tour guide would need to help address the issues. Now, let's say if our colleague in the sector takes an outbound tour, and if a member of the tour gets sick in the middle of the night, you can't say standard working hours, I'm off. And even if there is problem with a flight ticket, the colleague would need to help, because the communication is so advanced now. We can be accessed any time through email or otherwise. It's really difficult to quantify the work arrangement. I think we need to be very careful about standard working hours. It should only be set in light of the local situation. I'm also an employee. I would like to enjoy standard working hours as well. But we need to consider whether the recipients, including consumers, would find it beneficial. So we need to be very careful in reviewing the whole situation. About the guidelines, well, for some industries, such as the hotel sector, indeed guidelines can be drawn up as a balancing exercise. But for travel agents, it's relatively more difficult. The 11 sectors on this occasion include some sectors in the tourism industry. I don't know whether the job types I mentioned will be covered, or that you will be more selective, and some will be chosen for further studies. Secretary, regarding hotel and tourism industry, the important or more relevant job types are already included in the guidelines. Be it hotel or tours, group tours, tour guide, escorts, etc. The work environment is quite different.
I hope that through the tripartite committees, we'll be able to draw up some guidelines for employers and employees. And I hope that those working in the tourism industry can sit down together on how we can better put these good practices in the guidelines so that other industries can also use that as a reference. So how do you conduct the consultation? Well, can someone try to address this question? Commissioner, thank you. Tour guides and other guides in the tourist industry are special in that it is very difficult to try to measure their standard working hours. For example, for practitioners in the tourism industry, can we satisfy them with the minimum wage? We also need to think of ways to try to measure the working hours of a tour guide who is on business trip. Would the time in hotel also constitute as working hours? we already have a sort of model as reference. I hope that there will be more consultation to at least to know what the tourism industry wants. All right, it is my turn to ask questions. Secretary, first of all, you emphasized that a consensus should be reached. But then you also reiterated that we should not make any presumptions. We should just come in here and be as mellow as sheep and to just listen to what the government wants. So what is the government stance right now? It seems that the government is weak in the stance of standard working hours. And the public is quite disappointed, especially for those who work long hours and who also need to work overtime. Many professionals and even white collars face these questions. Those in the banking industry, those who work as accountants, they also face these problems. Would they work shorter hours with a standard working hour legislation? I don't know, but I hope that at least they would be rewarded for long working hours and not only the employer benefits from this. Well, of course, you still haven't worked out the contractual working hours. You said that you need tripartite committees for 9 industries. So this is only step 1. When would you move on to the next phase? Or would that discussion be indefinite? If you remember, in 2016, you actually renewed the officer working in this committee for 5 hours instead of 3 hours. Do you want the So are you going to extend it? And can you tell us how you are going to go about it? Well, we're not trying to delay any time because the goal of the tripartite committee discussion is to try to complete the guidelines gradually from 2019, and by early 2020 we'll be able to complete guidelines for all these 11 sectors. Or maybe I wasn't clear and that led to misunderstanding. When we discuss it in a tripartite platform, I'm just saying that I hope you would not only have your own presumptions and not listen to others. I didn't really point out the stance of the government. The government will actually be an active listener and try to listen to the views. We want to try to listen to the views and then try to streamline it into good guidelines. If no one is willing to discuss it, then it will be very difficult to reach a consensus. I just hope that we'll be able to make something out of it. Secretary, so you say that by 2020 there would be an answer. The current government tenure is only till 2022. So are you going to work towards SWH legislation, or would you only consider it when certain requirements have been met? We hope that the guidelines for these 11 sectors would kick off for a couple years before we review it again. We hope to look at it objectively to see whether there would be any progress made with such guidelines, so that when we review it, the next government could use that as a reference. Therefore, we hope when we complete the guidelines for these 11 industries in 2020, we would review it in the next 3 years, which would bring us to 2023, which is the next term of government. And they could then look into the direction towards the future. Well, yes, 2023, you're talking about the next government, but if you have a smooth transition, you would not to start to think about it earlier. Well, yes, as was the view made by the SWHC, we have always been working based on the former government. Mr. Dr Hon, second round. Well, the Secretary has kept on saying on our guidelines for the 11 sectors. But this is not something we can accept. You're just trying to legitimize long working hours. It is a trap, so we cannot accept it. Why was there contractual working hours in history? It was because standard working hours became different after a while, and so at that time we decided to withdraw. Because don't keep on talking about standard working hours. We withdrew. We boycotted the government's consultation because the government did not really work towards setting standard working hours. The government only looked into contractual working hours. You did not think of ways to try to stop overtime. I'm actually have a fever right now, but I'm still sitting here giving my views because this is very pressing. People are very frustrated about long working hours, second only to the very high property prices. You actually you're actually a time thief. You are stealing time away from workers. It is much like what Marx practiced before. You're now making people work longer hours than standard hours. All these years, the government has turned a blind eye to this problem. How can you tolerate this kind of time thief? We only have 24 hours a day. You cannot steal all these hours away from the people. I hope you would really go back and think about it clearly. We really need a strong government stance in this matter. Otherwise, you will not be able to press the business sector. Many of it think of it as a free lunch, and so they would not move a step. Or I hope you won't think a consensus would be reached. You really should help us to resolve this issue, to set standard working hours and to stop overtime. Well, Secretary, I do have some expectations for you because you used to work in the labor and social welfare sector. I hope you understand what I am saying. To try to make clear a government stance.
陸議員講到家庭價值。
我希望陸議員可以。
Secretary, well, I hope that Mr. Locke, after expressing his frustration, would have his fever subsided very soon. The tripartite committees would work towards coming up with working hours guidelines, and I hope that all these guidelines and working hours management could be discussed. Secretary, last week we held a meeting with Professor Sheck at the from the Family Council, and we talked about the impact on families of long working hours. It causes a strain on family relationships. Well, of course, he works for the families. People with long working hours will actually lose out economically. I think we need more data on this, because every time we ask about the data, it seems if you only look at the economic data, that's not enough. I think that more research should be done so that when we discuss these issues, we should also add in these elements and really try to understand the impact. Yes, a family-friendly policy is of course closely linked with working hours guidelines. We will work towards it. We're now going to adjourn the meeting if there is no AOB. All right, there is no AOB, meeting adjourned. Thank you.